States the Secret Service is investigating explosive devices sent in the mail to former President Barack Obama and the home of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Now, the devices are thought to be similar to the ones sent to the home of billionaire philanthropist George Soros earlier this week. We cross now to our reporter Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who's in New York, to give us the latest on this story. Sherwin, what do we know? This is quite a bizarre story that all these personalities were hit in a very close time together.
Well, it's an interesting time too, Peter, as we head into the midterm elections, less than 2 weeks until those critical elections. So the speculation as to why these devices were mailed to these high-profile figures, essentially high-profile Democratic figures who are out on the campaign trail for a number of candidates across the country. Let's confirm for you what has happened this week. A device was sent to the home of billionaire philanthropist George Soros, of course, the founder of the Open Society, a big Democratic funder in terms of the electoral process here in the United States. That was intercepted at his home just north of New York City. And then confirmation from the Secret Service today that a device was emailed to Hillary and former President Bill Clinton's Chappaqua, Westchester County home. The Secret Service saying in a statement that the packages were immediately identified during routine mail screening procedures as a potential explosive device and were appropriately handled. You will understand, Peter, that for these high-profile figures, former presidents, there are now procedures in place where mail is scanned before it actually reaches the principal, as it were. We also can confirm for you that a Secret Service team in Washington, D.C. intercepted a similar mailed device to former President Barack Obama. Of course, he has a home in Washington, D.C., where one of his daughters still goes to school. But we can also update you that there were some reports earlier that a device was also sent to the White House. That has now been debunked by the Secret Service. That is an erroneous report. So no device has been sent to the White House. We are also now seeing, Peter, reports that a similar device was also emailed to Barack Obama's CIA director, who has become a vociferous critic of President Donald Trump. John Brennan, we understand, has also been mailed a device. Let me read to you what the White House said in response to this. They released a statement very quickly after we started learning of these devices sent to the Clintons and Obamas. Quote, "We condemn the attempted violent attacks recently made against President Obama, President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and other public figures. These terrorizing acts are despicable, and anyone held responsible will be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. The U.S. Secret Service and other law enforcement agencies are investigating and will take all appropriate actions to protect anyone threatened by these cowards." Close quotes. Additionally, Time Warner Center in Manhattan, New York. This is a very busy tourist attraction. It's right where Columbus Circle is, near Central Park. The Time Warner building is evacuated. CNN, this is where CNN has its headquarters in New York City. They literally went off air in New York, and you saw Wolf Blitzer popping up at the CNN bureau in Washington to take over their broadcast. We understand that people have been told to shelter in place. The blocks around the Time Warner Center in Columbus Circle, Manhattan, has been evacuated. We understand that the NYPD's police squad is on the scene. There is a big bomb truck that has entered the building, and we understand that that team is in the process of detonating this device. We have seen reports that it could be a possible pipe bomb type device with wires coming out of it. We understand that there's a team on the ground. People have been pushed back, and that's the update that we have for you at this time.
All right, so just to get some clarity, I mean, these are real devices. These were active devices that, had they reached their intended targets, could have been fatal.
Well, it's difficult to speculate at this time. What we have heard from some reports that we've seen, Peter, some journalists talking to senior law enforcement agency officials, they have said that, quote, "this is the real deal." So when you have a team, you've got the entire building at the Time Warner Center evacuated. You have a team on the ground that is now going to detonate this device. So for all intents and purposes, this is the real deal. It's difficult for us to speculate as to whether the other devices that were sent to the Clintons funds to George Soros and John Brennan are the real deal as well. But there seems to be a systematic attempt here in terms of what the White House calls terrorizing acts. We understand that the Secret Service is now trying to piece this web together and see if there are any linkages, which we suspect there will be, between these devices literally showing up within the same week. And as we mentioned earlier, just 13 days before Americans go to the polls on November 6th.
All right, so motives is going to be something that people are trying to piece together. No indication so far that who might be responsible. No one's taken responsibility. Nobody's sent out a message on social media or anything.
No, absolutely not. We have not got that confirmation, but this is something that law enforcement, the Secret Service, is now trying to piece together to establish the facts. This is, generally, Peter, when these devices, when these terrorist acts actually succeed, is when we see people take responsibility, groups take responsibility for them. Of course, this, for all intents and purposes, is a failure at this point. We see this device now being detonated quite safely by the NYPD's bomb squad. There have been no injuries. There are no victims per se, no injuries as we speak. So for all intents and purposes, this is probably going to be a failed attempt at creating terror in New York City, in Washington, D.C., in upstate New York. And as I say, if history is our guide, generally when these things succeed is when we see people take responsibility for them. But of course, this is something that law enforcement, the Secret Service, now the FBI will be getting involved. We don't know how much bigger this will get in terms of the national picture. Is it going to be limited to the East Coast, Washington, D.C., New York City, New York State, or are similar devices going to pop up around the country, given that this is an election that is a congressional election? This is about control of Congress and control of the Senate, so it will be interesting to see if we see more developments popping up around the country, Peter.
Well, and I guess, again, people can speculate, and we can't at this stage, but one would have thought that they know that these things will be screened, and so perhaps the effect and the intended motive really, as you say, is more to scare than to actually believe that it would do harm in the end.
Yeah, the question is what would these people really want to achieve, given the strictures, given the security bubble that these individuals live under? The Clintons have, as a former president, a former secretary of state, a nominee for president, they have had Secret Service protection since their time in the White House in the 1990s. Similar for Barack Obama and his family. I'm not quite sure what sort of protection a former CIA director would have. I imagine not much, certainly not on the level of these principles that I've mentioned, but it would be very, very difficult for you to mail a device and with a ticking bomb inside and it actually reaching the person you might have intended it to, given the levels of screening. For example, if you send mail to the White House, it is screened far away from the White House.
Okay, we seem to have lost that connection there to Sherwin Bryce-Pease, and we were just seeing images there of the scene live in New York City, and he said that the area particularly around the Time Warner building has been evacuated and blocked off, and the Time Warner building is where CNN is housed, and they say that it could be some type of a pipe bomb that is being detonated or detonated there safely in the environs of the Time Warner building. And yeah, people literally sort of hiding or running for cover. Sherwin, you're back, I believe. We're just seeing images of NYPD and it looks like they're around the Time Warner building. So that process will carry on for a while, I guess, and people, again, New York, where we saw 9/11 so many years ago and acts of terror over time, probably okay, all right, it looks like we've lost Sherwin, so we're going to have to leave it there. But as I said, we're just seeing some live images there. Time Warner building is where the building has been evacuated, the home of CNN in New York, but also George Soros, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama's home, and also a former CIA director receiving letter bombs during the course of this past week. And so investigations underway to see whether they're all linked, whether they're connected, and what might be the purpose of that. We'll try and get back to Sherwin a little bit later on. Certainly we'll keep you up to date with this particular story.